and began to come back toward Dirk. The keyhole hand who had accompanied him followed. Lige said something to the pair of mounted men, climbed off his horse, and came after his father. Their boots made a hollow rattle on the plank walk. It was the only sound. Dirk shifted his war sack beneath his arm. He knew what was coming. Part of it was that the Glendennings led the South Fork faction, and that 4 years ago Dirk Hood had ridden for the North Fork bunch, and that it had always been this way between the two factions when they met in Caprock. Most of it was that Hugh Glendenning had been Orson's brother and Lige's uncle. Orson Glendenning stopped in front of Dirk, leaning forward tensely when he spoke, disbelief in his voice.
"Dirk Hood, I thought you were sent up for life."
Dirk didn't answer. There was nothing for him to say. Orson Glendenning spoke again, anger sweeping away the surprised sound in his voice.
"You were paroled," he stated. "Kruger finally swung it."
Dirk nodded, still not speaking, feeling the clammy sweat forming beneath his armpits. He could see thin hate twisting into Lige's face.
"And you can come back here," said Lige venomously. "You can come back here and stand in the very street you stood in to murder my uncle?"
Dirk felt his own anger rising.
"Lige?"
"He was your friend," said Lige, taking a vicious step forward. "He was the only decent man you ever called your friend in your life, Dirk Hood, and you murdered him."
"Shut up!"
Dirk's voice seemed to explode from him.
"I didn't come back to talk about it. What do you suppose I've been thinking about the last 4 years? Talking like that doesn't help now. I know what I did."
Lige moved in till his face wasn't a foot from Dirk's.
"I told you never to let me see you in Caprock again, Hood."
Orson grabbed at his son's arm.
"Wait a minute, son. How do you know Kruger didn't put Hood out here for just this purpose?"
Lige shook his father's hand off and reached out to grab Dirk by the lapels, yanking him off balance.
"Maybe he did. I hope so. Things might as well finish here and now."
"Take your hands off me," said Dirk Hood.
"You're leaving, Hood," said Lige Glendenning in a gusty voice. "You turn around and march out of Caprock and don't ever come back, or by God, I'll give you the worst pistol whipping Texas ever watched."
He gasped suddenly. Dirk's hand was closed on his wrist, tearing his fingers from the coat lapel. With a harsh curse, Lige jerked backward and tried to yank his arm free. Dirk flung Lige's wrist down and away from him.
"Lige!"
yelled Orson, jumping at them. Lige's face twisted savagely as he whipped one of his Colts out and above his head, lunging back at Dirk. Hood bent forward suddenly, swinging his war sack from beneath his arm and jamming it upward. Lige was plunging in and couldn't stop the down-swinging gun from thudding into the denim sack where Dirk held it above his head. Dirk felt the war sack thud against his shoulder from the force of the blow. He let go of it and hit Lige in the stomach. Then Orson's weight crashed in from one side and the keyhole hand struck him from the other. In a moment, Dirk was the center of the struggling mass. His head rocked as Lige struck again with his gun. He gasped as the keyhole rider came in with a knee lifted into his belly. Then Dirk lurched on forward into Lige and caught him in the stomach, knocking him off the curb. Whirling, Dirk grabbed Orson about his spare middle and jerked him around into the cowhand. He lowered his shoulder against Orson and shoved him and the rider off the curb and into Lige, who was just getting up, and they all went down in a heap. Dirk was on his feet like a cat, kicking free of Lige's clawing hand, turning sharply from one man to the other, panting, bent forward a little with his arms out. Orson jumped backward and shoved his coat away from his gun. Lige drew his second Colt and lifted it without trying to rise. A mounted keyhole man fought his rearing horse around to aim his Winchester at Dirk.
"That'll do, damn you, that'll do!"
Dirk saw Lige's Colt stop coming up, saw Orson halt with his coat held back from a weapon half drawn. Dirk turned toward the intersection from where the booming voice had come. Sheriff Mickey Walker shook the earth as he descended from the high curb to the rutted street and walked down to them. The sheriff had a big peacemaker in his horny fist. His eyes blazed like a ringy bull's from the apoplectic red of his face, and every time he took a step his snow-white goatee bobbed in rhythm to the angry quiver of his paunch. He reached the group and planted his size 12 hires in the ground like post oaks. He shoved his 10-gallon back on a mane of white hair.
"Lige Glendenning," he thundered,